welcome everybody. I'm really looking forward to this session. I think I'm going to learn an awful lot from these three people. All I'm doing is just introducing them, and the moderator Maria there she is. Hello, is online, and I just want you to note that Maria can see, she's looking in from that camera over there, so she can see the backs of everyone's heads. So would you all mind just giving her a wave, just to say hello and show your face? There we go, Maria, because it's a bit odd, isn't it, looking from that perspective. But Maria's going to moderate this session, and it's like a real pleasure for me to introduce this, because we're going to learn all about how we design patient-centred innovation for increased inclusion, and from people who've been through a really interesting process lately as part of the NHS Innovation Accelerator. So I'm really looking forward to this. And I'm going to hand over to Maria.
Hi, everyone. My name is Maria Kyriakou, and I am the Deputy Director for the NHS Innovation Accelerator. So this is the first time I've done anything like this virtually, so let's have fun with it. To tell you a bit more about the NIA, it's an NHS EI initiative, and it's developed in partnership with each of the 15 academic health science networks, and we are hosted by UCL partners. So the aim of the NIA is to support the uptake and spread of innovations that are already in use in the NHS. And each year we hold a recruitment process, and we onboard about 12 new innovations onto a 3-year-long programme. So the programme consists of tailored learning. You can connect to mentors, connect to other innovators. And today we're joined by 2 of our 2021 fellows. Before I introduce them, I just wanted to say a couple of things about what we're doing within the NIA on this topic. We've worked with our patient representatives to co-design a framework that we want fellows to work towards. The first principle is establishing a group of patient and public voices that informs either the evaluation, the adoption, or the spread of your product. And on this group, you need to have a broad representation of people that would need or use your product, also bearing in mind those with protected characteristics. The second element is getting feedback back from the group and using that to change, evolve, and develop your innovation. And the third element of this is having a strategy to communicate the outcomes of this process back to those that helped you come up with the ideas. So we work with fellows to understand where they're at in terms of those 3 points, and we provide them with ongoing support to move through those 3 phases on an ongoing basis. So now let's hand over to Louise from Brain in Hand and Emilio Sands from AcuPebble to talk about how they've included patient feedback into the development and ongoing evolution of their products. Thank you.
Right, I'm going to see if this works. Oh, brilliant. It's so lovely to be doing something in person. This feels like such a privilege and a novelty. My name's Louise Morpeth. I'm Chief Exec at Brain in Hand. I'm going to spend 10 minutes talking to you about how we involve users in the design of our product. Let's start with some statistics. There are a million autistic people in the UK, and they have really poor health outcomes. They experience severe health inequalities. 8 times more likely to commit suicide. 40% of autistic people are likely to also be living with an anxiety-based mental health difficulty. So poor outcomes, a huge loss of potential. That manifests itself, for example, in unemployment. Only 1 in 5 autistic people is likely to be in work, and out of people who have disabilities, autistic people are the least likely of all disabled people to actually be in work. So from an inequalities point of view, autistic people are getting a really rough deal. And that is a loss of human potential, but is also a huge cost to our society, estimated to be at least £32 billion a year. On the other side of the slide there are just some statistics that will be very common to you about the pressure that current services are under. We all know, I'm not going to rehearse the figures, but our services are pretty much at breaking point. They've never been great for autistic people. It's not uncommon to wait many years to get an autism diagnosis, and even with a diagnosis, you've no guarantee of services. I don't see, even with more money, that the offer for autistic people is going to improve. So really, the model is broken. So at Brain in Hand, we're interested not only in transforming outcomes for autistic people and people with anxiety-based mental health difficulties, but we're interested in transforming services. We have a very simple solution. We combine digital tools with human support. So simple digital tools and practical human support. And the difference in the model is we want support to be available when people need it, accessible 24/7, and completely user-centric, designed around the user, which is a real transformation from how support is currently provided. I want to introduce you in a moment to Jake. Jake is autistic. He's on our user panel, and he's just going to tell you a little bit about himself and his experience of using Brain in Hand. The aim of Brain in Hand is to help people live more independently, to keep their day on track, to work towards goals. They may appear small to you. Might be learning to catch the bus, use public transport, or pretty major, like going to university. Big transformational goals that people can work towards. So here's Jake, hopefully, if the technology allows. Oh, have we up some sound?
Process so far has not been the smoothest. I have been on the waiting list overall now for about 2 years. There is very little communication about the point of where I am within the waiting list. It's been stressful and quite anxiety-inducing, if anything. Where I want to be at after using Brain in Hand for a bit is I want to be at a place where workplace scenarios and in my day-to-day, I know that I have a tool and a resource there that can help me deal with those scenarios. After using Brain in Hand for a week, I'm already starting to notice that it's helping me in my day-to-day areas where I struggle in my life. For example, getting myself ready for my weekly shop. Food shopping for me is a bit of a task, but having something where I can visually start to organize myself has helped me greatly. Brain in Hand has made me feel more independent because I feel now that I don't have to panic every time that I've got something to do. I've got a checklist. I've got an action plan of what I need, where I need it. Simply by having the safety net of Brain in Hand, my general levels of anxiety have decreased. I feel way more confident in being able to express how I feel, but also it's given me confidence in that it's okay to express these things and to feel this way. I see Brain in Hand fitting into my day-to-day in all aspects of life, from work life to social life to my day-to-day routines. My goals for the future are things that most people take for granted. I haven't used public transport for over a year. I want to be able to use Brain in Hand to help me ease back into it better.
So that just gives you a flavour of what sort of challenges a typical user experiences. Jake is on our user panel. He's been brilliant at looking at the things we're developing and commenting on them. But the person I also want to introduce you to, there's not a video, there's just a photo, is Connor. Connor is also autistic. He waited a couple of years to get a diagnosis. He thought that when he got a diagnosis, he would get support. He didn't, so he turned to technology. And he's using technology very effectively to navigate his way through life. He uses social media very effectively. And he found Brain in Hand on social media and really didn't like us. was very negative about us. And so I approached him and I said, you know, I'd be really interested if you could come and do a review, do a warts and all review of what we're doing. And he said, yeah, all right then. He was a bit suspicious. Why would he do that? And he did such a brilliant review, which really showed us the things that we could be doing much better. When I offered him a job to become our user experience specialist, he was willing to come on board and actually join the team. So Connor is now our user experience specialist, and he is part of our product development team. This, for those of you who know about product development, will be a familiar cycle: discovery, design, development, delivery, and measuring. Discovery is when you get out there and you're trying to understand what the problem is. So we have a big user panel, 20 members of our user panel, all different types of experience. They help us to understand the nature of the problem. It might be through interviews, it might be through an email survey. Generally, autistic people aren't big on focus groups, so we don't tend to do focus groups, but we will find a channel that allows people to give their feedback. In the design phase, we'll mock up prototypes, we'll ask people to kick the tires on them. Again, large number of users who will do that with us. We then put something into development. When it is ready to be released, we have alpha users. This is a whole nother group of people who are willing to, again, kick the tires on a bit of software, tell us if there's bugs, tell us if it's not working. So we're baking user involvement into every part of the design product development process. We could take it a step further. So Connor recently joined me when I went to pitch for a grant for Brain in Hand, and he sat alongside me amongst some very esteemed people, and we won a grant for £900,000. And I would put it down to Connor being there to actually genuinely represent the user perspective. When people were asking him, I could turn to him to say, well, what do you think? What's your perspective, Connor? So I do feel very passionately that it could be easy to do it as a sort of box-ticking exercise, but involving users in an authentic fashion has really improved, I think, the quality of what we're doing and how we're doing things. I will finish, though, with a slight caveat. I don't think user involvement is a silver bullet. I think it's hard, it takes time, it needs resource. And if we only rely on a user perspective, we may miss things. So we obviously need to actively engage with those people who aren't users. So we understand if people don't use Brain in Hand, why that is, and design for them. Equally, we need to make sure that we understand what the research and evidence says. You might remember Steve Jobs saying people often don't know what they want until you show it to them. So there's a little bit of that. And also, I know there's many interventions which people love, which have been proved through research to be utterly ineffective. So we have to balance user involvement with looking to the evidence. But I think if we can get that partnership right, we can design and make brilliant products. And I'll hand over to, I think, next to Maria. This is a bit weird being virtual. Yep, I think Maria's back now. Thank you very much.
Thank you. It's just to introduce Emilio now. Thank you very much.
Hi everybody, my name is Emilio Sanz. I am the CEO of a company called Accurable, and I'm here to talk to you about health inequalities in sleep apnea diagnosis, which is what we do. Just a quick introduction about the sleep apnea. Can you hear me now? Yes. Okay. So quick introduction about sleep apnea. Highly prevalent condition and very serious. It's now recognized to be a cause of comorbidities such as diabetes, cardiovascular diseases, dementia, so huge cost for the economy. It continues to increase. The latest data is that there is up to 24% of the adult population affected. There's 1 billion people in the world. In the UK, that's around 8.1 million people. So highly prevalent, and the major issue is that most people remain undiagnosed. The leading cause for this is that it wasn't really taken seriously until 10, 15 years ago. And also that the current diagnosis method there's a big bottleneck in the system because it's very resource intensive. This has a big cost because sleep apnea doesn't kill people unless, this is the second leading cause. 25% of road traffic accidents happen because people have a sleep apnea and fall asleep. But more importantly, there is huge implications in patients with diabetes, with cardiovascular diseases. They end up being admitted more often to hospital, so there's a big cost to that. In the US, it's estimated to be $60 to $160 billion per year in productivity and in healthcare cost, which is a big problem. How it is done today? So sleep apnea, typical symptoms is you are extremely tired. You will sleep 8-9 hours per day, but you will be always very tired. You will be gasping at night. You will have typically loud snoring, highly correlated with obesity. But once you have those symptoms, you end up going to your GP. Public awareness is growing a lot, so there's a lot more people recognizing the condition and going to their GP, which is a typical entry point. GP will ask you a few questions, typically do a questionnaire and send you to the respiratory unit in the regional hospital. And this is where the pathway starts for diagnosis. Typically, they will send you home if you are able to use this device here. It's cardiorespiratory polygraphy. It's the gold standard for the ambulatory diagnosis of sleep apnea. And the challenge with this system is that it's quite difficult to use, as you can see. So quite a few groups have trouble with it. 1 in 4-5 tests needs to be repeated because you go home and you don't know how to use it. And what they've done to try to overcome that problem is that they ask patients to come to the hospital. They are trained for 45 minutes on how to use the device to then go home and use it. Still, most 1 in 5 tests needs to be repeated. Now, once the test is completed and the patient goes to be trained, goes back home, goes again to the hospital, gives back the system, and then as a sleep specialist will spend 1 hour, 2 hours manually looking at all the recording to manually interpret the signals and conduct the diagnosis. That is very time-consuming, another source of the bottleneck there is today, and it makes it a very expensive test for the NHS. So the current tariff for reimbursement from the NHS is £350 per test, mainly due to all the time required. That has created very long waiting lists. Before COVID, it was 3 to 6 months. Now there's hospitals with over a year waiting lists and backlogs they cannot cope with. And there's the risk of contagion of the multiple visits to the hospital. So it's just context about sleep apnea diagnosis, where we are today. I'm going to focus on the journey we have taken. So it's over 10 years of research and product development to get to where we are today. The main issues, we've conducted patient surveys in partnership with some of the patient advocacy groups in the UK. We visited and talked to quite a few sleep experts and clinics to understand both the healthcare professional side of things and the patient side of things. And these were the major problems. So there is long waiting list, and this is specific per region. Some hospitals are very good at managing this, some hospitals are not. And again, there's backlogs now due to COVID that they cannot tackle them because there's still increasing demand from the GPs. Typically in the elder population, they struggle to use the equipment, as you can imagine. It's a very complex system, even after being trained. So that's one of the reasons why either they need to repeat the test because it fails, or they ask the patient to spend the night in the hospital to conduct the test, which is an even more expensive process. Children, major issues of children, you need to sleep with the system. We have a clinical trial right now running at Sheffield Children's Hospital where we are validating the technology to extend. Right now it's for adults. We wanted to make it available for children. More than 50% do not tolerate the cables and all that, so the test cannot be completed, which is a major issue. And finally, in rural areas where you have a very dispersed population, going to the hospital twice, if it's a 3-hour journey, people have to take time off work, and it's a very big burden in families to go through this test. This is us. So the sensor you see on the neck replaces all the cables and all the sensors you saw on the other one. It's clinically validated in a large clinical trial at Royal Free London Hospital and proven to be equivalent to the other system. The big innovation is that the results are produced automatically. So you don't have to an expert doesn't have to manually spend an hour or 2 hours looking at the signals. But the big improvement for us has been the usability. The fact that by being very easy to use, we have overcome many of the challenges that were present with the previous pathway and the previous system. I mentioned this, like we were talking to experts and we ran one very large survey to understand the problems. And one of the things, and I'll give a few examples, is involving the actual patients, the people who will go through that, and specifically the patient group that you believe will have the biggest trouble with it in the process of design. So testing and iterating and testing and iterating until you come to a design that actually is good enough or excellent for the application that you were looking for. And I wanted to touch on some of them because I think the experience we went through was very enlightening, even to us. The first part of the system, so the system has a mobile application that you install on your phone and tells you what to do, also collects the signals from the sensor and then gets to the cloud for analysis, and the sensor that you see here. So from the hardware point of view, you have the sensor, the adhesive, and the packaging, which is the three things that the patient will have to deal with. the key challenges we found was, how do you create a sensor which is extremely easy to put on? And we are talking people with low dexterity, with arthritis, with we have patients over 80 years old. The sensor is small. It couldn't be smaller because then it became an issue. So we tested different iterations and we came up with something which is extremely easy to handle and to put on. Having an adhesive that allows you to put and take off, that doesn't fall overnight, very complex. More important is having an adhesive that the patient can replace themselves, extremely complex. I'll give you another anecdote that was very interesting. We went through, I think, 50 iterations of the adhesive. Most people would put the finger on the adhesive as they were replacing it, which actually impacted the properties of the adhesive. And it was extremely difficult to get people to not put the finger on the adhesive. After lots of iteration, we came with a system that has, and I have a few if you want to see them, 2 tabs. So you see the ones on the bottom with the yellow thing. We ask the patient, put the first finger on the yellow tab, then peel off the adhesive, take the sensor and put it on. The fact that the first hand was blocked by having it blocked on the table solved the problem, but it had to go through quite a few iterations. The packaging was another problem. We went through different form factors for packaging. We ended up with a tiny tin that you screw in and out. Turns out that screwing is the easiest way to handle any type of packaging. If you have any tabs, anything that requires small pieces is very difficult for certain people, especially older people with arthritis, etc. So again, quite a few iterations on a packaging that was easy to open and use by anybody. And another major challenge is we really wanted to solve the problem of people having to go to the hospital. This was before COVID, so now it come very handy. And that meant that, can we do something that can be put in the letterbox of people? There's a limit at the Royal Mail and the system in the UK, which is 2.5 centimeters. How can you create your whole packaging, the packaging for transport, the packaging for the system and everything, in the format that actually will enable people not to be home to receive it? And we managed to do that, which has enabled us to now, for instance, with Royal Free Hospital, which is one of our first clients, we take care of sending and receiving all the systems to patients. And it's very easy because they get it home, they come like an envelope, they can use it and they send it back. It's a prepaid envelope they can put in any mailbox. So it has become a very easy way for logistical deployment at scale, which was one of the major issues, to offload the hospital. The other component that the patient sees is the mobile application. Now, mobile applications, Apple and Android are very specific about the user guidelines you should choose. It turns out that those don't really work in the whole population. Not everybody knows what a house means or a back arrow means. Like, there's all these icons that are intuitive to most people, but not to everybody. So we had to reinvent the full user design for that. So the first thing we did was we detected that there's a lot of anxiety in a medical test, and we wanted to make sure that that didn't happen. So we created a user design which is closer to an Apple product than to a medical device. So we used animations, we used colors and everything in a way that makes it less invasive, less threatening. And that actually proved to be a really good thing. With children, we have superheroes and we have unicorns, which again is one of the issues. The anxiety to sleep has to be taken care of. Access to mobile devices, not everybody has. So what we created is a system that you can use your own mobile phone, or the hospital or the center can send you a mobile phone with the app pre-installed, which makes it very easy. And then the app in the phone is single use, so you cannot get out of the app. You cannot go to the menu. People get lost. It's all locked, so it's single use. And it really reduces the need for you to know about technology, because you have a phone that as soon as you open it, there's nothing else. You see the colors and the buttons. Every screen has one button. It's super easy, it's just instructions. We have animation videos for steps where actually require a bit more than just pressing continue. We have gone through years of testing, but in the clinical trial we conducted, which is published now in the British Medical Journal, we also validated the technology usability, which was very important for us. So what we did was send patients home with a sensor and the phone and say, go home and just follow the steps. You figure this out. And it was, the hospital were actually reluctant to do that because they are used to having to train the patients. And we said, let's try in a few patients and see what happens. And it was a huge success. 100% of the patients, all of the patients, were able to complete the test and come back with valid signals that produce a diagnosis. We actually had the issue that some patients we couldn't use for the trial because the other system didn't work, which is, as I was saying, like 1 in 5 times typically you have to repeat the test. Finally, so no instructions. So it's easy to see something simple when it's already done, and you say obvious is like that. Very simple messaging and instruction is something that takes a lot of effort and iterations. You really need to write it down, put whatever message you want, and then test it in typically dozens of people, and you get surprised sometimes about how they react to the same instructions that you thought were obvious, and then you have to iterate until you arrive to the right set of words that will make them do what you wanted without any deviation. It's a slow process, but it's always usability testing and iterating on that. And finally, another one of the things we identified is what happens with internet. Do you need internet? Of course, not everybody has internet, even on 3G, or if you live in rural areas, it can be an issue. So we made it so the whole process can be done offline. If you are provided with a phone and a sensor at the hospital, or we send you via the Royal Mail, you can go through the whole process offline, send it back, and then we take care of uploading the signals. Again, that had to be incorporated in the design, and that was earlier in the process as part of the patient groups that we were looking at for accessibility. That was one of the things that we need to overcome. We need to be able to allow people without a phone, without internet, without knowledge about technology or a phone, how do we minimize the probability of them not being able to use it and completing the test successfully. And that's where we got. So we are now starting to be live in several hospitals, and our sweet spot is really making super simple a test that was very complex, and specifically for certain patient groups, it becomes a game changer because they really struggle with the previous system and in many cases could not be diagnosed through that system. Thank you.
Thank you both. That was really, really interesting. I guess just the only reflection that I have to add is that there are really nice examples of understanding where some of the blocks were to using the products, and getting that feedback really means that you can change your product morally because it's the right thing to do, and then commercially because it means that everyone can just use it and it just intuitively makes sense. So it works for absolutely everyone. Are there any questions from the audience? Louise or Emilio?
That's it. Go on. Yes, of course. It's mainly, so the three benefits of the system is cost savings from economically, but also in time, because it typically with us, what used to take 2 to 3 hours per patient of clinician time, now it takes 15 to 20 minutes. But then also in monetary savings. So when you sell to the NHS, of course, you have to prove that. And then also, two of the other big priorities for the NHS is reducing waiting times, which is a big benefit, and health inequality. So how do you make it accessible to everybody? But it's the first checkbox has to be cost efficient. Otherwise.
Hi, question for Louise. Can you tell me a bit about the demographic of your user group? It's just that today I've seen 3 examples of patient involvement, and I may well have missed others, but they've all been white men.
No, the demographic that we serve are people from the age of 14 and up, no maximum cap. And our user panel is very mixed in terms of age and ethnicity, gender. We actively seek out to have a balanced user panel. So we have 20 users at the moment. We hope to get a grant soon for another piece of work. We'll expand our user panel to 30. So yeah, it just so happened that Connor and Jake were with us today.